Hi, welcome, Comadres and friends, to our April 2024 Zoom teleconference. I am Tess Tobin, the project manager for Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club. The leadership team and I are pleased to have you join us for tonight's teleconference as we are beginning our 17th year. It has been our privilege to support Latino authors throughout these 17 years, and we look forward to many more years to come. Tonight, please help us welcome author Melissa Rivero, author of her debut novel, The Affairs of the Falcons, which won the 2019 New American Voices Award and a 2020 International Latino Book Award. Her latest novel, Flores and Miss Paula, is a wry, tender novel about a Peruvian immigrant mother and a millennial daughter who have one final chance to find common ground. Born in Lima, Peru, and raised in Brooklyn, she is a graduate of NYU and Brooklyn Law School. She lives in Brooklyn with her family. Interviewing Melissa is Comadre Julia Brantes, who is a board member of Empowering Latino Futures. She is part of the leadership team of Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club, having served as the submissions coordinator and project manager before she relocated out of state. She attends conferences and festivals, continuously scouring book listings, searching for books written by Latino authors. Julia currently resides in Raleigh, North Carolina. Take it away, Comadre Julia.
Thank you so much, Tess. Thank you so much. Melissa, welcome, Comadre. So nice to see you. I interviewed you actually for your last book, The Affairs of the Falcones, so it's nice to chat with you again this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I was lucky enough to get this as an ARC at ALA and reread it again recently in anticipation of this interview. I'm a former Brooklyn girl myself, born and raised in Brooklyn, and I attended many festivals throughout the city for all of our different Latino families. So this really brought me back home. Thank you for that.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really good to hear.
I miss the city so much.
Where in Brooklyn did you grow up?
I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn.
Oh, Bed-Stuy. Okay.
Yeah. I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and then lived in Astoria later on. So then I was really involved with I got to appreciate a lot more of the Latino cultures, all around, dotted around in Queens, which was really sweet, really sweet. So your book here, Flores and Miss Paula, is written in two voices. Do you want to tell our readers a little bit about the story?
Yeah, so Flores and Miss Paula is about a mother and a daughter who are essentially being forced out of their neighborhood and out of their Brooklyn apartment where they live and have lived together for decades. Flores is in her 30s. She works at a startup. Paula, her mother, is in her 60s. She works at a local discount store. And the two of them are really trying to figure out what their relationship is now. It's been 3 years since there was a patriarch of the family, Martín, Flores' dad, and Paula's husband passed away. And there is certainly like a distance between the two. And now that they're forced to leave their apartment, they kind of have to decide whether, like, what happens now in their relationship and in their living situation.
Yeah, I think that's sadly, it's a situation that a lot of families find themselves into, with the younger generation being glued to their phones, and that's how they live, and the texting, etc. And the older generation wanting to do things more traditionally, the way we might have grown up. So it was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, I think for them, it was more that the loss of someone who was significant to each of them for different reasons was really the bridge between the two of them.
Yeah.
And so now with that absence, it's like, okay, well, what happens to me, right? Which is something I think that we all experience when we experience loss. Like what happens? How do we change, right?
Right.
Also, how does that loss impact our relationship to other people who also have a connection with that person who is no longer
Mhm.
there? Um, and so for the two of them, they're sort of at this crossroads in their relationship. And while Flores does work at, at a startup, and she's a millennial, um, it's Paula is also sort of coming to confront what she expected, where she expected she would be at this juncture in her life, right, in her
Mhm.
60s.
Mhm.
Um, so there is that tension, but I think that tension strives more from this particular loss.
Yeah.
Again, is so significant for each of them.
Right. And I think what I found anyway is that loss and what they're each going through um, in their respective areas, with Flores in her job, Miss Paula in hers, um, and maybe what they expected, where they would be, and where they are going in the future. How this all shapes them. And it's true what you say. That thread, Martin, was the thread that held them together, and I think it's also what helps them going forward.
Yeah.
I think, it really helps them going forward. Was it difficult writing in the two voices because they are so distinct?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the book alternates between Flores's perspective and Paula's. Flores is told in first person, Paula's in second, direct address. Um, it wasn't, to be honest with you. When I first started writing this book, I started with a scene that actually happens later in the novel. But it was very much a Flores scene, and I thought that the book would really be driven by Flores, and it would only be about her.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I was writing her scenes, her interactions with other people, I just started hearing her mother more. And
Mm,
I knew her mother was going to play a role in Flores's life, but I didn't realize really just how much this particular character wanted to be on the page until I started writing, and I realized, okay, so this either Paula's going to have her own book, or she needs to have a much stronger presence in this one.
wow.
And so once her voice started to become clearer to me, as I started writing her, it just started to pour out.
Wow. Great. No, I like reading stories told in multiple, from multiple views, but it all kind of blends. They're set apart, but then they all come together.
Mhm.
And I really loved the way it ended. Um, I wasn't sure it was going in that direction, but when it did, I was very happy. I was very happy. I will leave it at that. Um, and so this book does talk about, mother-daughter relationships, and we're coming up on Mother's Day next month. Is this something that you wanted to bring out to your readers, or was this a point that you just wanted to, as you said, as the story grew, did you think you wanted to make sure you focused on the mother-daughter relationships?
Yeah, I mean, Mother's Day is next weekend, so
Yeah,
that's right. I think, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, just kind of, I don't know how May just kind of crept up on us. Um, I again, like when I started it, I really did think it was going to be just a Flores story. So as I started to hear Paula's voice, I think I very much wanted to try to understand where Paula was coming from.
Hmm.
Um, and she is very much inspired by the women in my life, and really the women in my life are the ones who I kind of like I'm just fascinated by. Um, Meaning like my mom, but really my mother and her friends. Like they're just I find them very fascinating. They're so like not what I think people expect
Mhm.
women of a certain age to be like. And so I love that they are not any of that. My mother-in-law is another example too. I mean, she is a woman who at 72 loves a good party and likes to go out dancing at night. And she dated like I should not be talking about my mother-in-law on here. But she's like
Yeah,
not, like they're women. They're not, it's not like they're all of a sudden just like their
they're older, they're not
sensuality.
dead. They still have life.
Yeah, their
They still have that
sensuality
life.
and their desires
Yeah.
and their their vitality is still very much there, and that doesn't dissipate with age. And so
Yeah.
I really found I found myself just wanting to understand Paula better. And also because I think that as a daughter or as daughters, we may have preconceived notions about our mothers. And some relationships with mothers can be very fraught.
Yeah.
Um, and it's understandable when we kind of maybe want to put some distance between us and that mother figure because we expect a mother to behave a certain way or because we've been hurt. And in this case, I kind of wanted to understand where Paula was coming from, um, so that maybe Flores could glean a little bit, get some
Mm.
insight about her mom, that she didn't maybe have before.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. As an aside, in my church group, where we've been talking about grief this past month, about, when you lose someone and how you react to it, and how different people, the same situation can happen to different people, but they react differently. And I see how each of them have reacted to Martin's passing, in the different ways. So it's really interesting to see that. Was that something that, like, you had to do a little bit of research on, or talk with people about, how different ages react to death?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily even how different ages react to death. I think it's just different personalities react to death
Different person. Okay.
differently, right? Like, for some folks, I think just not, I don't want to say not acknowledging the death, but sort of putting it away and
Mm-hmm.
just going about your routine as if it didn't happen is a way, it's just one coping mechanism.
Right.
Or delving into your work so that you have something else to focus on, something that you can control, because death is uncontrolled. Like, it isn't, that isn't something that we can control, right?
Correct.
The way we don't want to process that loss necessarily, so we throw ourselves into our work, and that is something that Flores did to cope
Mm-hmm.
with the loss. And at other times we reach out to people who we think could better understand the loss, or who we feel in some ways, well, they've experienced something even more painful. Maybe they could understand what I'm going through, or my loss
Right.
can, and it's horrible to say that we do that sometimes, but we do
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes as humans.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like size up our grief by being like, well, at least I don't have it as bad as that other person.
Right.
Um, or we think that maybe someone will understand because they've experienced something similar when that's not always the case. So I think I just wanted to, and also just the relationships are so different, right? Losing a parent is very different from losing a partner.
Correct.
And those losses, I think we grieve differently because there's always, in some ways, when you have a parent who has actually been a parent, and has been sort of this compass and this guide, when that person is lost, you do have a sense of like, well, where do I go now?
Yeah.
Right? It may be different if you had a parent that was absent. Maybe that loss, you wouldn't feel it as much, or maybe there would be some sense of then trying to understand
Right.
why that parent was not present to begin with, right? Um, and just an example, whereas if you lose a partner, I mean, you're not just losing someone who you've shared a life with, but you've also kind of lost the possibility of life continuing.
Mm-hmm.
What would have happened had this person lived.
Right.
So, So I think it's just natural to process those kinds of losses differently. And just in general, like we process grief
Mhm.
differently depending on where we are in life, you
Right,
know?
right. Absolutely. It's definitely something that we each handle differently. Um, so I want to talk about a happy time in the book. You brought me right back to my childhood going to Flushing Meadow Park and attending those festivals. Was that something that, and I'm used to live in New York, so is that something you still get to attend and be a part of?
I try to. I mean, we have family friends here in Brooklyn who try to do something for Peruvian Independence Day.
Hmm.
So if I get a chance to go to Flushing, great, but if not, like I know there'll always be something closer
Right.
to like in Brooklyn where we can celebrate.
Yeah.
But I have two children and my husband is Polish, and so we both do try, or at least I try. My husband, I don't know, he doesn't try as hard, I think, to get the kids in touch with the culture. To me, it's very important that they are in
Yeah.
touch with both Peruvian and Polish culture.
Yeah.
Um, so we do go to the Polish Day Parade every year, for example, and with, I do take them to some Peruvian Independence Day celebration. It may not be the Flushing Meadows one, but
Right.
we do try to keep at least that tradition alive.
Yeah. That's nice. That's nice. So one thing I loved about New York is that, you can turn the corner and you're in another little a neighborhood that's a different flavor. I want to call it a flavor, right? A different flavor or different sounds or different smells, from the food. So one thing I really loved about New York. And you brought it back in so much of it. So, and even people who may not be native New Yorkers like you and I are, um, it can still get a flavor of New York from there. Um, is there something that when you were done with the book, you wanted readers to be left with?
No, I mean, I can't say that I write with any particular agenda in mind.
Hmm.
Uh, I once I finish a novel, it sort of reveals itself to me
Okay.
in some ways. Um, I think that when I was finished with this one, it left me with a feeling of hope, that even through some dark times, we can still find moments of both levity and revelation and continuation.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that ultimately I would want readers to take that away from this book.
Hmm.
And also maybe to leave with a little bit of I don't want to say is empathy the right word? F- Forgiveness, I guess, when it comes
Hmm.
to how we perceive not just our parents, but also like our children, right?
Hmm.
Like give each other some grace, because we're not always going to be necessarily open in those relationships.
Hmm.
And that can be hurtful at times, but I think sometimes it's also okay.
Yeah.
Um, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I mean, and it's funny you said that because there is there's that hope at the end, you know. And I don't want to give anything away, but there's that hope at the end, and it made me think like, yeah, if I was reading this book for the first time, and that's what I would walk away with at the end. Definitely walk away with at the end. So, what are you working on now?
I'm working on something that, quite frankly, I'm not sure if I'm going to finish. It is another novel, but I'm not sure if I'm in a place emotionally where I can necessarily delve back into it. Um,
Okay.
I think sometimes as writers, we need some distance, um, emotional distance from the work. So we'll see. I'm not sure if I'll maybe put it away for a little while and then go back to it. Um, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I know plenty of authors who say the same thing. They're like, I have notebooks lining up a shelf, with different stories, and I'll go back to this when I'm ready. I'll just focus on something else for now. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you, Melissa, for sharing your work with us. It was a lovely read, and thank you for bringing me back home to New York. And Comadre Tess, take it away. You're on mute.
Sorry. Hi.
There you go.
Thank you, Melissa, so much for joining us and spending some time with us. I know we all enjoyed reading your book. And we're especially thankful to Ecco Press, an imprint of HarperCollins, for their generous donation of books to our early registrants. Thank you as well to Julia Brantes, Comadre Julia, for interviewing you. And we would like to thank all our volunteers without whom this book club and all the associated work would not happen. Mil gracias. Please remember to support our authors by writing a review of their books on sites like Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, etc. Those reviews carry weight with the publishers as well as other readers. Buy books to support our authors, and if your library does not have a book you want to read, ask them to order one. And please attend our virtual local book club meetings and bring a friend or two. Remember, our book club is open to men and women, Latinos and non-Latinos. All are welcome. Our May 2024 books are Anita de Monte Laughs by Jatel Gonzalez, and Vanishing Maps by Christina Garcia. Again, thank you all for your continued support of our book club and Latino literature. Please join us in celebrating Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club throughout the year by buying books and supporting Latino authors. Good night, and always read Latino Lit. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Tess.